This video was brought to you by the lovely members of my Patreon. You really can't avoid or escape other people fetishizing you. You don't really get to consent to that. It would be nice if we did, but it's not like I can just control, people projecting or not projecting their fetish on me. What I can control is who I allow into my bedroom. Hey guys, it's Kat and it's time for another episode of True Tea. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me here for yet another episode of True Tea. I greatly appreciate those of you guys who come here every single week, ready for a fresh brew of True Tea. You guys are here every single week with great comments. You guys make me think, you guys challenge me, and I appreciate you guys deeply for that. So anyway, how are you guys doing? What are you guys up to? How you guys been? I've been, it's been some ups and downs. I have been having a mixed week, I would say. I have been in isolation 100% for 44 days. I just did the math. And I'm frankly quite surprised by that. I mean, I am used to being alone. I'm used to, doing that sort of thing, but I'm definitely having a hard time with it. And, I am thankful that I have, friends and things to talk to and all that jazz. But, isolation for me has been kind of a depressing experience, as I'm sure it has been for most of you guys. So I'm trying to, keep it fun, keep it enjoyable. And one of the things that I have been doing is teaching myself how to make cocktails. Because of course I can't, go out and, get a cocktail the way I used to. So that's what I'm making right now. I am putting together a whiskey sour. I'm realizing that I'm not really mixing it together the right way, but girl, it's all going to the same place, as we always say. So I'm gonna mix that up, and then we are going to get into this video. We're gonna be having a conversation in this video about fetishism, and that's why I'm making a drink for myself, because I haven't had alcohol on here in a while, but this is just one of those conversations where I feel like I'm gonna need a drink. So I'm mixing this up, and we're gonna pour this out, and we're gonna get right into this conversation. Now, anyway, I'm gonna take a sip of this, and then we're gonna get right into this conversation. Let's see if I did a pretty good job on this. Yeah, okay. Definitely mix my ratios up, but it is what it is. Anyway, let me know what's in your mug in the comment box below. Let me take another sip. We have to have 3. So I wanted to have this conversation because there were a lot of really interesting comments in my last video. And there's one particular comment that really got me thinking. And I've been wanting to make a video about this on my channel for a while. And so I thought that I would come to you guys with, this brew. Like I said, girl, I'm drinking alcohol because I feel like this is gonna be a real dicey video. And as per usual, this is me giving you my true tea. I, of course, want yours. Please give me your brew. I love you guys, leave long, thoughtful comments. Big word of advice though. YouTube is eating up a lot of comments. So before you post that comment, please copy it. Make sure that it gets through. I am not deleting things, but YouTube, I don't know what's going on over there, but they are deleting stuff, and that's very frustrating, obviously. But yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate you guys, but I'm about to respond directly to one comment because I had a lot of things to say, and actually it really feeds into what I wanted to talk about, so let's get into it. So I wanted to talk to you guys about being fetishized and how I personally feel I have avoided it, right? And we're gonna get into this more later on in this video, but I wanna start out this conversation by saying that being fetishized is one of those things that you don't really control, you can be fetishized by people who seem totally sweet and nice to you and like they really like you and they get everything about you and still be fetishized, right? That's possible. That is a thing that is real. So you can't truly control whether or not somebody fetishizes you. For me personally, I have this really deep aversion to being fetishized as somebody who for a very, decent time in my life was sort of dealing exclusively with people who seemingly fetishized me. So I have a lot of sensitivity around that. And I think that I've sort of done a lot of things to avoid that. And so I kind of wanted to have that conversation. So the comment that I wanted to directly respond to was a comment that basically expressed shock and surprise at the fact that I was not into race play. Now, the reason why that particular comment frustrated and annoyed me was because I have a hard time understanding how anybody could look at my YouTube channel, listen to what I talk about, look at all of the years and years and years I've done creating anti-racist content, talking about all of these things that I don't like in terms of the way that white men often have approached me, and still for some reason believe that I'm, shucking and jiving for some white man behind closed doors, right? Now, of course, this is the conversation I often have when I express the fact that most of my current partners are white men. We've made several videos about why that is, so I'm not gonna get too deep into it in this video. But long story short, of the men who pursue me the way that I personally feel I deserve to be pursued, white men do it the most frequently, they do it the best, and they often do it the most aggressively in the way that is compatible with me. We've made a whole video about black men. I'm not gonna get too deep into this here, but my experience almost universally with black men has been that they only see me as a means to an end sexually. I just spent the past month talking to this really, really handsome black guy. He was a school teacher, he was a football coach, he was really, really attractive. And when it came down to it, after a month of talking, after a month of getting to know each other, he just wanted to have sex with me. And that's all he was looking for. Even though I was super clear about that not being what I wanted, not being what I desired, when it all came down to it, he just wanted to fuck. For me, it just always ends up like that. It just always ends up, where we get to the point of meeting, and it's on some I want to fuck tonight kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that white men don't do that. I'm not saying that white men have never done that to me. They do it very frequently, probably by numbers, more often than the black men who talk to me because there's more white men who speak to me. But that all being said, just because I date white men does not mean that I'm comfortable with them fetishizing me, and this should be obvious. It's been interesting for me to express the truth of my life and then have people almost be shocked at the fact that it doesn't fit their particular view or assumption of what they assumed my life to be. I'm polyamorous, but that doesn't mean I'm easy. I'm polyamorous, but that doesn't mean that my standards are low. I'm polyamorous, but that doesn't mean I fuck men on the first night I meet them. Right? I think if you've ever been a man, and I've given some men the link to my YouTube channel, usually as a way of saying goodbye, because I don't like to connect with men who know my YouTube channel. But usually, if you're a guy who has approached me, and if you're in the audience, feel free to make yourself known, you'll know that I'm a hard ass. I'm a hard ass. I am not easy to talk to when you first talk to me. There's like a lot of layers of things you have to sort of get past in order for me to be open and comfortable talking to you. And now we've talked about this in previous videos. I sometimes do have the tendency to push people away very quickly, very early on when they approach me. But the thing about that is that it's a defense mechanism, because for a very long period of time in my life, I was used to being fetishized. I was very, very used to being fetishized, and I do not want to live like that anymore. So I guess if we're gonna start this conversation out, we should start it there. I think that's a very good place to sort of see our conversation before we talk about how I sort of moved on from that, right? Now, being, a black trans woman, it's often very hard for you to be in a position where you feel like you can participate in the dating rituals that most people do. I remember that there was a time when I was younger where I would go to parties and I would feel so present, but outside of the whole thing. Do you know what I mean? Where, when I was young, especially in the early days of my trans life, You know, I would have these experiences where I would go to, you know, some sort of dance party or some sort of gallery show, right? And I would be there and I would be hanging out with people and I would be socializing, but everyone was connecting with each other in a way that I just wasn't. I just could not access that general way of interacting with people because I was not considered part of the dating pool. Now, of course, I look back on those times and there were definitely times where that definitely wasn't true. I did a lot of just not even acknowledging or even seeing the people who were expressing interest in me back then. But back then I definitely felt that way. And I remember that I had this really bizarre experience where on one hand, I would have that experience in my daily life, in my daily IRL meat space life. But on the other hand, I would go online and it seemed like I couldn't beat these guys off of me. Oh, that sounds really bad. I, couldn't get them to leave me alone, basically. In fact, all they wanted me to do is beat them off. But you know what I mean? Like, I could not get these dudes to leave me alone. And so it was this really bizarre, I go online, I'm hyper desired. In the real world, I'm ignored. And that was a very hard dichotomy for me to really exist in because you start to question what's real and what's true, right? Now, here's the thing, for me, when I was a younger Black trans girl, now I can't speak for all trans people, so this is just my personal narrative, but I'm being real with myself. I'm talking real about what the situation is. And we're having these rough ass conversations. It's true, T, you know what I mean? So when I was younger, because I had that experience of feeling so ignored in my daily life and so valued in my private life, I definitely used a lot of male attention on the internet as a means of validating myself, right? I wanted to feel sexy and pretty and good about myself. So if a man on the internet expressed attraction to me and I was vaguely attracted to him, I was willing to put up with it. And the thing about that is that oftentimes when you do that, oftentimes when you put up with it, you end up in situations where you're being hyper fetishized. And that was definitely what ended up happening to me time and time again when I was younger. I've told this story several times, but there was a time where I met up with this guy and, he sort of sold me this whole story about how he was going to take me on a date and treat me nice and da-da-da-da-da-da. And what he ended up doing was driving me into, his trailer and having sex with me in his trailer after making me hide in the back of his seat while driving into his neighborhood, right? And that dichotomy was so, that reality for me was so normal. This idea of men who wanted to have sex with me, were interested in having sex with me, but were so paranoid about everyone knowing. And that becomes real frustrating because again, you're dealing with that hyper desired online, but ignored in-person thing. And I'll be honest, a lot of the times when I met up with these guys, it was just negative experience on top of negative experience on top of negative experience. I mean, so frequently what would happen with these guys is that they would gaslight me into believing that they felt a certain way about me. They would get me cornered. And the next thing you know, they're touching me where I don't want to be touched. They're doing things to me that I don't want to be done. They're doing things to me that I specifically asked them not to. And it's all because they were just so excited to even be in a position where they had access to my body. And back then, my self-esteem was so low. My sense of self, my self-value was so low that I let them do it. I let them do it. And for a while, that was my normal way of existing, where these men were sort of doing what they wanted and I was getting some strange validation from it. And it's so funny looking back because the men that I was doing all that stuff with are not men I would be even vaguely interested in now, but I was so desperate, frankly, to feel loved and embraced, like somebody cared about me or someone was attracted to me, that I was willing to sort of engage with these men who were actively fetishizing me. And that was enough somehow, right? Now, for me, their fetishism was obvious in the fact that they didn't want anyone to know what they were doing. Now, I think I want to sort of make a couple of arguments for nuance here. There are a lot of men whose attraction to transgender women is very, very, very confusing. And so they end up being in a position where they want to explore, they have a curiosity, and they want to see if it's what they like. I don't think that that is necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that men who are curious about transgender women are necessarily a bad thing. Most men in this world are never presented with a transgender woman as an option, romantically or sexually. So it's very common for these men to become very fixated and fascinated with experiencing something with a trans woman. Now, every time I say this, there are people who say, well, I live in a big city and I always see trans women everywhere. But most men in most places in the world are not in situations where they get to see several transgender women in a row. Where I was living in college, I was living way up in the hills. You know, I was really one of the few trans women, one of the few trans people in the whole city. And I got a lot of attention. Let's just put it that way. I got a lot of attention. I had a lot of men who were interested in me. That was common for me back then, right? And it's so funny looking back because I did not even think I was, God, sometimes I hate looking at old photos of myself because I was so much better looking than I actually thought I was. Like, I had such a low self-esteem, low self-value that I would let these men basically tell me that I wasn't pretty enough to be treated with respect, you know? And one day we'll maybe do a whole video about chasers because chasers love doing this sort of shit where they will gaslight you into feeling like you are the most worthless thing ever. And so you know what you need to do in order to prove that you have some worth in this world? Get down on your knees and suck this dick, right? That's a lot of the way that these men sort of operate in this like very abusive, fucked up cycle. And it's kind of sad because I know some trans people who get really wrapped up in that experience because that is such their only experience. But personally for me, and maybe this is gonna sound really privileged, I figured out that once I started to actually require more, I got more. Once I started to actually like myself, turns out that that rubs off on people. Not everyone's gonna like me. Not everyone's gonna think I'm attractive. That is what it is, right? But I could say that after years and years and years of me being fetishized, I've now sort of created a, I would say, system of avoiding situations like that of my past. So I guess we should talk about that now. It took me a really long time for me to acknowledge that I deserved more than just men fetishizing me and hiding me and treating me like I was nothing. And kind of what I landed on, one of the first rules I made was that if you're too chicken shit to sit with me in a dark bar, why the fuck would I ever give you access to my body? Why? You know? And I remember when I first had this rule, there were a lot of men who were very resistant to this. There were a lot of men who they just did not want to, you know, give me that sort of thing that I wanted. And I think sometimes what some people don't get, I mean, this is a generalization for sure, but I'm just gonna say it, is that, you know, a lot of men really do treat you the way that you allow them to. I'm not saying that when a man walks up to you and does something misogynistic to you, that's you allowed it, whatever. Some men are just like that. But I recognize from my past that I was allowing men to treat me like their dirty little secret. I was allowing men to actively fetishize me. I was allowing men to sort of treat me like I was worth nothing more than a warm hole, right? And once I started saying, you know, to them that I wasn't gonna do that, it's crazy the amount of you know, change that came to the value of men that I was interacting with. It was really wild, you know? To this day, I still get plenty of messages from men who actively want to fetishize me. I get plenty of emails and contacts from men who are clearly just looking to have their little transgender experience, right? But those men, in my experience, are not willing to put up with all of the hoops and all of the requirements just to have that experience. Most of these men are not going to, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but the vast majority of these men are not going to go, you know, 3 months into sort of taking you out and treating you with respect just so they can fetishize you. So now I think when it comes to trans women, there is this really complicated conversation about fetishism, because to a lot of trans women, fetishizing means being attracted to the things that make you personally dysphoric. And I've said this in the past because, you know, I am somebody who I'm never gonna, you know, explain this. Y'all just have to take my word for it. I'm somebody who couldn't top even if I wanted to. Let's just put it that way. Can't do it, literally couldn't do it, right? So it's not an option, and it's also not an interest of mine, right? And I remember when I was younger, especially after years and years of being fetishized, I used to really give men a lot of shit for having that desire. And before I get further into this, I wanna say that there's nothing wrong with you personally saying this isn't what you want, and you personally being uncomfortable with men being interested in you that way. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That being said, I do think that there needs to be some conversation about how a man being interested in that part of your body, a man being attracted to that part of your body, doesn't really make him inherently a fetishist. You may feel that way because that's how it feels to you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, he is somebody who can't see you beyond what you represent as a trans person. There are a lot of men out there who like dating transgender women, who want to take transgender women home to their families, who want to introduce transgender women to their friends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they also want to do certain things in the bedroom. And I don't think that this is a this or that kind of thing. I think that men can very well respect, celebrate, affirm, and love transgender women and be interested in bottoming to them. And that's not necessarily a fetish. For me, the fetish comes when they literally can't conceive of having a reason to be around you if you're not doing that thing, which of course is the argument that I got into so frequently, where because I couldn't do the thing, because I didn't want to do the thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'd have these shitty arguments with these guys. These guys, here's the thing about these guys who fetishize you. I'm not saying that it's impossible for them to do the long con where they speak to you for a really long time and then, you know, you get to the, you know, in the 12th hour, it turns out they were fetishizing you. Not saying that that's not possible, but most of them won't. Most men who fetishize people, most men who fetishize, period, are looking for somebody to dispense that fetish to them. And if you sit there and say, no, that's not what I want, and then you also say, no, actually, I deserve more than that. And if you would like to spend time with me, you got to do this, this, and that. The vast majority of them are not going to do that, and this just to get to your dick. The vast majority of them. Is it impossible? No. But the vast, vast, vast majority of them, especially these guys who approach transgender women online, like I said, when I was younger, I was very, very insecure. And I felt like I needed to be validated. And here's the thing about these guys. They know that transgender women feel that way. They know that. So they will really rely on trying to find that little insecure girl who doesn't quite have her sense of self yet so that they can take advantage of them, so that they can feed into their fetish. And for some guys, part of their fetish is being able to convince you to have sex with them. That's unfortunately for a lot of men, part of their fetish. Being a creepy asshole who, you know, pressures you into having sex with them, right? And these men are really not gonna have the patience to sit there and, you know, listen to you talk about yourself for days on end. Generally speaking, that's just not how it happens. Now, for me, the reason why I got kind of offended when somebody insinuated that my partners actively fetishized me, it was for a couple of things. First and foremost, because I kind of reject this idea that it's impossible for me to date cis men and it's impossible for me to date white men without them actively fetishizing me. What does that say? That says that the only women who are free from from being fetishized are cis white women, which of course we know is not true. Men of all racial backgrounds and even people of all gender identities fetishize white women. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? I hate this idea that some people literally can't conceive of a relationship between me and a person who isn't Black or isn't cis, or is cis rather, without them fetishizing me. I first of all, I'm insulted that you think I would sort of not put them through the ringer to figure out where they stand on that sort of shit. But also, it's just, it's just so condescending to say that. It's just so condescending to sort of believe that it's totally impossible for anyone to actually love a trans person, actually love a Black woman without actively fetishizing them. One of the things this person said was they're just more polite about it. Who do you think I'm dating? You know what I mean? Like, I've been, for example, in a relationship with Nathan for 4 years. Nathan and I have so many conversations about race. We've had so many conversations about trans shit. What I love about Nathan, and honestly most of my partners, is that they do not give a fuck. I will never be able to express to people how attractive it is for people to just not give a fuck. That is so attractive to me. Because here's my thing with men who actively fetishize me as a trans person, or even as a Black woman, is that they can't shut the fuck up about it. For me, one of the first things that makes it clear to me that somebody's trying to fetishize me is that they seem like they can't have a conversation with me without talking about my race and without talking about my gender. Every conversation leads back to that. Every sort of thing we say has to lead back to that. They can't just talk to me about my day. They can't just talk to me about my job. They can't just talk to me about what I'm doing in my life. They've got to talk to me about being trans and being Black. And personally for me, while I sort of respect that there are some people who, listen, like I said, I'm from Southern California, dating interracially, dating, it's all very normal to me. But I understand that there are some people who didn't grow up in diverse areas, who I'm one of the first Black women they interact with. I'm one of the first trans people that they interact with. And so they can't help but talk about that stuff, right? I get that. I do get that. And I get that for those people, some of them are very, very excited by the prospect of gaining access to my body because of my racial or gender difference, right? Get that. Respect that that's a weirdness. For me personally, I don't have patience for that. I do not have patience for that. I don't have patience to explain to you my life as a Black person and what it's like to be Black. I don't have patience to explain what it's like to be trans. Of course, if you get to know me, that shit will come up organically, right? But whenever I'm in a position where somebody has to bring every conversation back to that, I check out. And I'm low-key annoyed and low-key offended by this idea that I would be like tolerant to it, Usually when somebody starts asking me questions about that shit, like I might be polite and answer the questions, but I lose all interest. You guys know I explain myself for a living. That's what I do all day long. What I really don't want to do in my personal life is explain myself to them all day long. I appreciate connecting with men who are experienced, who have had so many experiences that certain taboos are no longer taboo to them. That's why I personally prefer men who have had experience with transgender women. That's why I personally prefer men who have dated outside of their race before. Because I don't want to explain shit. And I'm not saying that everybody who needs to have that shit explained to them is a fetishist, but I'm personally saying that it makes me uncomfortable. So even if they're not a fetishist, having any sort of weirdness around race, having any sort of weirdness around transness, it frankly just makes me totally check out of the situation entirely. I no longer have interest in them when I know that that's the case. So truly for me, I have a lot of these conversations about who they are, where they're at, how they feel about these things really early on. And I don't jump into the bed with them. I talk to them, I get to know them, we engage in that way. And the reality is that, like I said, the vast majority of these guys who are just looking to get their dick wet or get your dick wet, they're gonna move on really fast from you when they know that you're somebody who is gonna stand on their own 2 feet and say no. They just are. Now, anything's possible. Like I said, this guy could play the long con and fetishize you down the road. But girl, honestly, for these guys, it's really not that deep. It's truly not that deep. So I guess that's what I had to say about the situation. I'm really curious how you guys feel, how you guys have navigated around being fetishized. I think what's so interesting to me is that people have argued in previous videos that I would be, that I'm fetishized by, the white cis men that I end up dating, as though I wouldn't be fetishized by the Black cis men that I would date, as though I wouldn't be fetishized even by some of the trans people that I could potentially date. Like, you really can't avoid or escape other people fetishizing you. You don't really get to consent to that. It would be nice if we did, but it's not like I can just control, people projecting or not projecting their fetish on me. What I can control is who I allow into my bedroom. And I do that by really having a ton of conversations with them about where they're at. And honestly, you know, there have been times where I've rejected people and maybe felt a little bit bad about it afterward because I was like, oh shit, was I being too harsh? But frankly, a lot of these little things that I have that make me push people away really early on, they really do come from me wanting to protect myself, wanting to protect my heart, wanting to not be in that position again where I'm being devalued. Because the common theme with most of those people who fetishized me in the past is that we met on Monday and we met Monday night, you know, like we jumped right into it and they used me, dumped me, and then moved right along. And back then when I had low self-esteem, I was all too happy to do it, you know? So yeah, that's just kind of what I had to say. And hopefully, you know, you guys were inspired by it. Please give me your true tea in the comment box below. I would love to know how you guys feel about this. This is definitely a kind of complicated topic. So yeah, let me know how you guys feel in the comment box below. If you've made it through this entire video, please put this emoji in the comment box below. I'm just saying it's the thing that all the cool kids are doing. You don't have to do it at all. You know, no one has to do anything. I'm just saying that like, we all agree here that like the cool kids put the emoji in the comment section. So like, do with that what you will. Anyway, on that note, I will see you guys next week. Right now, you're looking at 2 videos you can watch if you'd like to continue to sip true tea right here on this channel. And in the corner, there are several ways you can send me a tip if that is something you'd like to do. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.